Hey, what's up guys? Alex here, and this is the second part of the series of tutorial about WordPress and WordPress 101 for beginner developers. Thank you for checking this video. If you didn't follow the first parts, I suggest you to get a quick look. It's just 20 minutes, it's not that long. But if you don't want to check the first part and just jump right in the second part and get to the funny and interesting things, just a quick recap for you. So in the first part, we created a style.css file that contains all the information that WordPress needs to show our custom theme inside the appearance theme sections. And you can see here we have our awesome theme with all the information that we specified inside our CSS file. We then created the standard WordPress files that is a header, a footer, and the index. Inside the index, we use these two hooks, these two functions that WordPress gives us to call the header and call the footer and include it inside our index. The header, super simple, just open a boilerplate HTML file, and the footer, even simpler, we close the HTML. That's it, we're ready to go. So in this second part, we're gonna take a look on how we can implement custom CSS and custom JavaScript and properly include it inside our theme and properly print it, and how to use the functions.php file of WordPress, a really powerful file. So first of all, let's start with creating our custom structure. By default, you can follow your own rules. You don't have to follow my rules. There's not a specific rule that has to be followed absolutely, but as a suggestion, it's better to organize your files in folders and subfolders to keep it clean. And if you decide to deploy your team or to use your team with other developers, it's way better to have a really well organized, well built theme structure. It's easier to find files, it's easier to find folders, and it's easier to update. It's more scalable. So let's start with creating our CSS, our custom CSS. So we already have here the style.css file, and usually in a static web page, on a static website, we will proceed to include our style inside the CSS file, but we're not going to do this because we want to create a scalable theme. We want to create a better theme with a better structure. So all the CSS files are going to be inside a specific CSS folder. So let's create this folder, .css. And as I say, you can use your structure, you can use your name for these folders, are totally complete freedom. Let's create our new file. And I would like, when I create a custom theme, to use the same name of the theme, or the first name, or some code name for my files that are the same name or similar name of our theme. So this is our awesome theme, and this is my awesome.css. Super simple. Let's do the same for the JavaScript file. So .js, and create inside a new file. Let's name this file awesome.js. Let's create some super simple boilerplate inside our CSS file. I want my margin 0 for HTML and body. I want the color to be dark gray. I want my background to be a light gray, and I want my font to be sans serif. And for just the body, I want a little bit of padding just to not have all the elements that I'm going to create attached to the border of my browser. And let's keep it like this for now. Let's keep it super simple. This is a super simple CSS boilerplate that we can use as a starter for our theme. same thing we're gonna do with the JS. So by default, I'm not using a framework, a JavaScript framework or a JavaScript library. For now, we're gonna keep it super simple. We're gonna create some JavaScript functionalities in the future, of course, with just vanilla JavaScript. So for now, just let's write comment inside our JavaScript file. We're gonna use this later. So let's close this file. Right now we have this structure that is really kind of decent, organized structure. If we, of course, we save this file and we open our front end and we reload it, we see that nothing's changed. And if we open the inspector, we're gonna look inside the head, or we're gonna look inside our HTML structure. There's no trace of our file that we created. WordPress cannot include by itself file. We have to manually specify those files, where they have to go, where they have to be printed inside our HTML structure. And this is super simple. WordPress gives us a lot of options, a lot of actions and functionalities to do that. So let's see what to do. First, we have to create a really important file that every team has, is the functions.php. The functions.php is in the repository of WordPress is specified as an optional file, but I say that is a really important and absolutely necessary file that you have to put inside your default folder of your team, so WordPress can detect that file when it creates and start building your page. And WordPress for you checks inside that file if you created some function that needs to be executed before the printing of all the content, before your blog post gets shows or before your pages get loaded. And this is good because we can actually edit and manipulate the source code of WordPress before WordPress loads our file. This is really powerful and it's super easy. So let's take a look how it works. Let's create a new file and of course call it functions.php. Remember, always keep this file in your base folder and call it just functions.php. Don't change the name, it's really important. Let's go inside, open our PHP tag, and let's create a standard function. So I want to include my CSS file inside the header of my team because that's how a standard web page works. Let's first of all create a standard function. Let's call like awesome script here. This is a standard PHP function. You notice that I used in my function name the same name of my team. Be careful, every time you create a custom functions inside your function PHP file or inside a plugin, always give it a unique name. Try to give it a unique name because could happen that another user that is creating another team or another plugin uses the same functions name that you used, and this is not really good for PHP. Having multiple functions with the same name can break definitely your site. So for now we're gonna keep it super simple, but remember to always create a unique name for your functions. Inside this function.php, we're gonna use the first hook, the first functionalities that WordPress gives us to include our site. And pretty much all the functions, that the hooks that goes inside a function, they start with the acronym of WP dash. So let's start with WP dash. We wanna enqueue our style, so we can call the hook WP dash enqueue dash style. And let's open it. And this hook comes with 5 different parameters. Just the first one is required, the other 4 are optionals, but it's always better to use them all if we can, because we're gonna have more control on our file. So the first option is just the handle. It's just a simple name that WordPress uses to use the file that we want to enqueue. So let's give it a standard name that could be like our custom style. And because we're enqueuing style, WordPress by default is gonna include at the end the .css, so we don't have to include it. The second parameter is the source, is where our file is located. And be careful, because WordPress needs the absolute path, not relative path. So instead of writing css/awesome.css, where actually our file should be in our folder structure function css awesome.css, we have to include the entire absolute path of our WordPress installation. How can we do it? Simply, we can use a pre-made function that WordPress created for us. So get template directory URI. This function prints for us the full URI of where our template is. In my case, it's going to be inside local.wordpress.com/wp-content/themes/awesome-team. And we can connect this with our custom string where our CSS file is. The third parameter are the dependencies. Is an array where we can specify inside all the dependencies that our CSS file has. We don't have any dependencies, so we can print an empty array. The fourth parameter is the version number. Also, this one is really important, because if we create a theme and then we stop using it and we reuse it after, I don't know, a month or two, or we go check the code, it's always better having a version of all our files, so we know which version are we working on. If we're using a specific framework, which version of that framework or that library we're using, or if another developer is working with us on this team, it will be super easy for him to know which version of this file, this template is using. So let's specify it as a string, our version number. That's by default, we're gonna use the 1.0.0. And the last parameter that we're gonna omit right now, because the default parameter is the one that we care, is the media parameter. It is strictly connected to the CSS. And a media parameter, you can specify if this file has to be printed on all the devices, or just on a print device, or just on a different resolution device. So by default is we can leave it blank, or we can specify all, because we want to use this file on every scenario our site is loaded. And that's it. With this hook, we enqueue our custom style inside these functions. So now what we have to do, we have to call with an action our function and say to WordPress when he has to execute this function. To do this, we have to use the action. Add action is a hook that gives us the ability to connect a WordPress execution process to a custom functions. WordPress execution process is when WordPress does specific stuff, like when he creates the template, when he embeds script, when he generates something. Basically, every time WordPress does something, there's a hook, there's a function that connects that specific position, the specific moment in our theme generation. In this case, we're gonna use the moment where WordPress enqueue the scripts, when he generates all the scripts that have to be included inside our theme. So WP include scripts. Take a look here. We have the first one that is the include script, that is single, and the second one includes scripts. We have to use the second one that include all the scripts. So when WordPress generates and print on our front hand side all the scripts that we created. So we use this, and because we're using an action, we have to specify this parameter as a string. This could be kind of tricky, and this could be kind of hard to remember, but if you don't use a string, your PHP and WordPress is going to trigger an error for you. So you're going to know when you did something wrong. The second option is the functions that we have to call. And what kind of function we have to call? The function that we specify, because we want this function to be triggered in this specific moment. And also our function has to be specified a string. Priority and arguments, for now we are not gonna care, is These are two parameters we're gonna see in the future. So let's save our functions.php. Let's open our site, reload, and what's going on? There's nothing here. Our header is empty. There's nothing here. Why it didn't work? We don't have any PHP error and our code is right. So what's missing? Super simple. We forgot to specify where WordPress has to print this script, where it has to embed this code we created. To do that, we have to use a pre-made function, another hook that WordPress gives us the option to use inside our header, because we want the style CSS to be printed inside our header, so before the entire site is generated. To do that, inside our head tags of the HTML, we open our PHP tag and we use the WP head functions without any parameters. This function connects the WordPress hooks and WordPress actions to say, here, this is the place where you have to print everything I create. So let's take a look at our website, and you notice that the color is changed, the padding is changed, and if we go inside our head and we open our header tag, we're gonna see a new code here. This we're gonna see actually a bunch of new code. This is some HTML boilerplate that WordPress creates for us for SEO, and we're gonna extend this functionalities, but for now, don't care about this, just care about the custom style CSS that we created. So we see we have link rel style sheet. We have our ID, that is the name dash CSS, the name, the unique name that we created. We have our absolute path, the absolute URL that connects our CSS file, and with the version at the end. And we have our all media to say that this style sheet is valid for all type of media. So the second thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna keep going and embed the JavaScript file. The JavaScript file has to be embedded in the footer. The first thing that I thought when I started to create my custom themes is, okay, I have to do the same. Like, I have to duplicate this entire thing. I have to create another functions to include the script now instead of style, and then specify that I want the script in the footer. But I was totally wrong. This action enqueue script can recognize by itself if inside my custom function I have a style or I have a CSS or a JavaScript file embedded, and that's pretty sweet. That's really great. So to do that, we're gonna just use another functions from WordPress, that is WP underscore enqueue, and this time we use script. Remember, single script. And we pretty much gonna have the same parameters as the style, but slightly different. The first is the name, so custom JS. The second parameter is the mixed search, so we can copy. Also, this parameter needs an absolute path, so we can copy the template directory URI, and we can connect our string to our JS awesome.js folder. The third parameter also in this way are dependencies. We don't have any, so we return an empty string. The fourth parameter is the version of the script. So also in this way, we can simply specify our first version. The fifth and last parameter of the script hook is a boolean. It means that it can accept just true or false, and we can use these parameters to specify to WordPress if we want our JavaScript printed in the header or in the footer. If we want to print it in the footer, like the logic to do is we have to report true. By default, it's false. So by default, if we don't specify this parameter, all our JavaScript files are gonna be printed in a header. Printing the JavaScript files in the footer is really good for our website speed and page load time. So let's save this, Let's open our site again, reload it, and check in the footer. Let's open the body and see footer. There's nothing. What's missing? Again, we didn't specify where in our footer we want WordPress to print all the information that we created in the function, that we connected in a function. So what we have to do, pretty much the same thing we did in the header. We open the footer, we find a sweet spot before the closing of the body tag. We open our PHP tags and we use the functions WP footer without any parameters. Also, we save, we reload the site, and open the body and check before the closing of the body. That's it, our custom JavaScript file with the absolute pod, the version, and the right script. So you notice that we didn't go inside our header PHP file and we didn't actually print manually and inline our CSS style. This is a bad behavior. This is something we have to avoid and we don't have to use inside our WordPress site. It's not safe and it's not good for our page load. Always use the file functions.php to handle CSS, JavaScript file, or other type of file like specific fonts, or if you want to include frameworks or a specific library, always use this methodology. There are other methods and there are other extensions and hooks for the script printing process that we're gonna see in the next lesson. As usual, thank you for checking this video. If you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel, or if you want to just share it, that would be really appreciated. If you don't give a shit as the first video, it's fine. Thank you for checking anyway, and hope to see you next week for the third part of this tutorial. See ya!